My name is Vorth-Prime, and I am what you humans would call supremely stupid. Though, in my defense, nobody could have predicted that leaving a broken warship on a backwater planet would result in the most catastrophic military blunder in galactic history. But here we are 3 cycles later, and I'm hiding in an asteroid field, dictating my final report while Earth's newly constructed fleet hunts me like a wounded space rat. Let me start from the beginning, before everything went sideways. The hegemony of superior minds, yes, that's actually what we called ourselves, had been expanding across the galaxy for millennia. We were the apex species, the enlightened ones, the beings who brought order to chaotic worlds. Our ships were marvels of engineering, our weapons could crack planets, and our intellect was unmatched. Or so we thought. 3 cycles ago, my battle cruiser, the inevitable Conquest, suffered what our engineers called a catastrophic quantum cascade failure while conducting a routine survey of a primitive solar system. In layman's terms, our ship broke down spectacularly while hovering over the 3rd planet, a little blue marble populated by bipedal mammals who had barely figured out how to split atoms without killing themselves. Commander Zelak-9, my second in command, had suggested we simply retreat to the outer system and call for repairs. But I, in my infinite wisdom, decided that abandoning the ship on the planet's surface would be more expedient. After all, what could these primitive creatures possibly do with advanced hegemony technology? They were still using chemical propulsion, for crying out loud. Zelak had asked, his 3 eyes blinking in what I now recognize as barely contained horror. The Prime Directive clearly states that we should not leave technology with civilizations below Class 7. I had actually laughed at his concern. Zelak, my cautious friend, look at these creatures. They spend more time fighting each other than advancing their science. Half their planet doesn't even have reliable communication networks. They'll probably worship the ship as some kind of deity and leave it alone. Oh, how magnificently wrong I was. We evacuated the crew using escape pods and made our way to the outer planets to await rescue. The inevitable Conquest, all 7 kilometers of twisted metal and broken dreams, came to rest in what the humans called the Nevada Desert. I remember watching it crash through the ship's external sensors, thinking how fitting it was that such an advanced vessel would end up on such a desolate world. The rescue ship arrived 2 standard months later. As we prepared to depart, I made another brilliant decision. I ordered a complete information wipe of our databases regarding Earth's location. No point in cluttering the hegemony records with data about irrelevant worlds. I had told the rescue captain. After all, we'd never need to return to that insignificant rock, would we? Fast forward 18 months. I was enjoying a relaxing assignment cataloging gas giants in the outer rim when the first reports started coming in. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting unusual quantum signatures from the direction of several previously conquered systems. Nothing alarming at first, just minor disturbances that could have been attributed to stellar phenomena. Then came the silence. The hegemony maintained communication networks spanning dozens of star systems. When 3 entire sectors went dark within a week, High Command finally took notice. Investigation fleets were dispatched. What they found defied all logic and reason. The humans had not only reverse-engineered our technology, they had improved it. Lieutenant Commander Frex Delta was part of the first reconnaissance team to encounter what the humans now called their Liberation Fleet. His report, which I've memorized word for word, still gives me nightmares. The vessels appeared to be of hegemony design, but wrong somehow. Sleeker, more aggressive. Where our ships relied on overwhelming firepower, theirs seemed built for speed and precision. They moved like predators, coordinating their attacks with an efficiency that surpassed our own tactical protocols. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that they weren't just using our technology, they were using our own ships against us. The humans had somehow managed to convert captured hegemony vessels into hybrid monstrosities that combined their engineering philosophy with ours. The result was a fleet that could match us in firepower while outmaneuvering us at every turn. The interrogation records from captured human officers were even more disturbing. It turned out that my abandoned ship had landed practically on top of something called Area 51, apparently a secret military installation where the humans already studied unusual phenomena. Instead of worshipping the inevitable conquest as I had predicted, they had descended upon it like scavengers on a corpse. Captain Sarah Martinez of the Earth Defense Force had been quite chatty during her brief captivity before her inevitable escape. According to her testimony, human scientists had begun dismantling my ship within hours of its crash landing. They approached the technology not with the reverence we expected from primitive beings, but with the ruthless curiosity of natural predators. "You aliens make everything so complicated," she had said, laughing at her interrogator. "All those redundant systems, overcomplicated power sources, and inefficient weapon designs. It's like you never learned that simpler is often better. We just stripped out the unnecessary parts and rebuilt everything from scratch." The audacity was breathtaking. These beings had looked at technology that had taken the hegemony millennia to perfect and decided it needed improvement. What's worse, they had been right. Human engineering, it turned out, followed principles that the hegemony had never considered. Where we built ships to last for centuries, they built them for optimal performance. Where we favored overwhelming force, they preferred surgical precision. Where we relied on complex automated systems, they maintained manual controls that allowed for improvisation in combat. The first major engagement occurred in the Rigel system, where a hegemony patrol fleet encountered what appeared to be a single human vessel. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the human ship had destroyed 4 hegemony cruisers and disabled 2 more before disappearing into hyperspace. The survivors described weapons that seemed to fire concentrated starlight and shields that bent space itself to deflect incoming fire. But the humans' greatest advantage wasn't their technology, it was their approach to warfare. The hegemony had grown complacent after millennia of easy victories against primitive civilizations. Our tactics were formulaic, our strategies predictable. We had forgotten that warfare was supposed to be creative, adaptive, and ruthless. The humans remembered. They struck at our supply lines, turning our own logistics network against us. They captured our communication frequencies and flooded them with misinformation. They studied our battle tactics and developed counters for every standard hegemony maneuver. Most disturbingly, they seemed to genuinely enjoy the challenge of outwitting supposedly superior opponents. General Marcus Thompson, the human military leader who had orchestrated their campaign, had sent a message to Hegemony High Command that still circulates as a cautionary tale. "Thank you for the ship. We couldn't have done this without your generous donation to our cause. We look forward to returning the favor with interest." The arrogance was maddening, but we couldn't argue with the results. System after system fell to human forces, not through brute strength, but through superior tactics and converted hegemony technology. They moved through our territory like a virus, corrupting everything they touched and turning our own resources against us. Intelligence reports suggested that the humans had established mobile construction facilities, factory ships that could convert captured hegemony vessels into their hybrid designs while in transit. They weren't just conquering our territory, they were metabolizing it, turning our strength into theirs with terrifying efficiency. The psychological impact on hegemony forces was catastrophic. Soldiers who had never known defeat suddenly found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by beings they had been taught to consider inferior. Morale collapsed faster than our defensive lines. Then came the Battle of Proxima Station, and everything changed again. Proxima was one of our most heavily fortified positions, surrounded by automated defense platforms and protected by an entire battle fleet. The humans arrived with what appeared to be a modest force, perhaps 30 ships against our 200. The engagement should have been a massacre in our favor. Instead, it became the final nail in the hegemony's coffin. The human fleet moved with perfect coordination, their ships dancing between our weapons' fire like they could predict our targeting patterns. Which, as it turned out, they could. They had analyzed our combat data from previous engagements and programmed their computers to anticipate our responses to various scenarios. But the real surprise came when our forces began suffering system failures. Weapons that should have fired remained silent. Shields that should have held collapsed without warning. Navigation systems began reporting false positions. It took our technicians far too long to realize what was happening. The humans had weaponized our own technology against us. Every hegemony ship contained standardized components built to universal specifications. The humans had somehow developed a virus, a quantum plague that could propagate through our computer networks and turn our own systems into weapons against us. Within hours, Proxima Station was under human control, its weapons turned against fleeing hegemony ships. The same defensive platforms that had protected the station for decades were now hunting down our own vessels with ruthless efficiency. That was 6 months ago. Since then, the hegemony has been in full retreat, abandoning system after system to human forces. What was once the most powerful military organization in the galaxy has been reduced to scattered refugee fleets fleeing toward the galactic rim. And it's all my fault. If I hadn't abandoned that ship on Earth, if I hadn't been so arrogantly certain of human inferiority, if I had simply followed protocol and waited for proper recovery operations, but none of this would have happened. The hegemony would still rule the galaxy, and humans would still be confined to their single world, blissfully unaware of the vast civilization that surrounded them. Instead, they've become the galaxy's newest apex predator, and they learned everything they needed to know from studying the wreckage of my ship. The irony is almost poetic. The hegemony fell not because we encountered a superior civilization, but because we underestimated an inferior one. We gave them the tools of their own liberation and then acted surprised when they used those tools more effectively than we ever had. My current location is being traced even as I record this message. Human hunter-killer teams have been pursuing hegemony leadership for months, and I doubt I'll evade them much longer. They seem to take particular pleasure in capturing the officers responsible for their gift of advanced technology. Part of me wonders what they'll do when they catch me. Will they simply execute me for war crimes, or will they put me in one of their research facilities to study hegemony physiology? Given their apparent fascination with reverse engineering, I suspect the latter. There's a certain justice to it, I suppose. I abandoned my ship on their world without a second thought, treating Earth as nothing more than a convenient dumping ground. Now they're treating the entire galaxy the same way, as territory to be claimed and resources to be exploited. The proximity alarms started screaming just as I finished recording my pathetic confession. 3 human ships had materialized from hyperspace, their sleek hulls gleaming like predatory teeth in the starlight. I recognized the design, immediately modified hegemony interceptors, but wrong in all the ways that made them superior to our originals. "Attention, hegemony vessel," came a voice over the communications array, speaking perfect galactic standard with that distinctive human accent that had become the stuff of nightmares for my species. "This is Commander Jake Sullivan of the Earth Liberation Fleet. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with immediate vaporization." I almost laughed at the politeness of it. These beings had spent the last 2 years systematically dismantling the greatest empire in galactic history, and they still observed proper communication protocols. It was such a wonderfully human contradiction, ruthlessly efficient killers who said please and thank you. "Commander Sullivan," I replied, knowing that surrender was my only option. "I am Vorth-Prime, former captain of the Inevitable Conquest. I believe you've been looking for me." There was a pause, then what sounded suspiciously like excited chatter in the background. When Sullivan spoke again, I could hear the grin in his voice. "Well, well, the gift that keeps on giving. You're absolutely right, Captain Vorth. We've been very eager to meet you." 20 minutes later, I found myself in the cargo hold of a human warship, surrounded by what appeared to be a mix of human crew members and, to my complete shock, former hegemony personnel wearing human uniforms. The betrayal stung, but I couldn't entirely blame them. The humans had a remarkable talent for convincing defeated enemies to join their cause. Commander Sullivan turned out to be a compact human with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. He studied me with the same clinical interest I might have shown a particularly interesting specimen. Behind him stood Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human scientist who had apparently led the effort to reverse engineer my ship. "So you're the genius who gave us our start," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice dripping with mock admiration. "I have to say, Captain, your ship was a masterpiece of overcomplicated engineering. It took us 3 months just to figure out why you needed 17 different backup systems for your gravity generator. And another month to realize we could do the same job with 3 components instead of 17, added a familiar voice. I turned to see Tech Specialist Court 7, one of my former engineering crew, now wearing human insignia. The sight made my stomach turn. "Court," I said, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "I see you found new employment." He had the decency to look embarrassed, but his response was firm. "They treat us better than the hegemony ever did, sir. No caste system, no genetic hierarchy, no arbitrary punishment for creative thinking." When Dr. Vasquez asked for volunteers to help improve the ship designs, half the engineering staff signed up. That explained a lot. The humans hadn't just stolen our technology, they had recruited our people to help them understand it. No wonder their improvements had been so rapid and effective. They had combined their innovative thinking with our technical knowledge, creating a synthesis that neither species could have achieved alone. "Your timing was perfect, you know," Commander Sullivan said, settling into a chair across from me. "We'd been studying crashed UFO technology for decades. Progress was slow. Most of the ships we recovered were too damaged to provide useful data. Then you dropped a completely intact warship right in our laps. The irony wasn't lost on us," Dr. Vasquez added. "Here we were, desperately trying to understand alien technology, and the aliens themselves delivered the ultimate research opportunity. It was like Christmas, our birthday, and winning the lottery all at once. I wanted to protest that it had been an accident, a moment of poor judgment, but the words stuck in my throat. These humans had turned my mistake into their greatest triumph, and rubbing salt in the wound seemed to be a specialty of theirs. The real breakthrough came when we realized that your technology wasn't actually superior to ours," Sullivan continued. "It was just different, more complex, more elegant in some ways, but not necessarily better. Once we understood that, everything changed." Dr. Vasquez pulled up a holographic display showing side-by-side comparisons of hegemony and human ship designs. "Your ships are built to impress," she explained. "Beautiful, sophisticated, designed to showcase the superiority of their creators. Our ships are built to win, function over form, efficiency over elegance." The comparison was damning. Hegemony vessels looked like works of art, all graceful curves and intricate detailing. The human modifications were brutal and utilitarian, stripping away aesthetic elements in favor of additional weapons, stronger shields, and more efficient engines. It was the difference between a museum piece and a predator. "But the real game changer was understanding your psychology," Sullivan said, his expression growing more serious. "The hegemony has been dominant for so long that you've forgotten how to adapt. Your tactics haven't evolved in centuries because you've never needed them to. You fight the same way against every opponent, regardless of their capabilities or strategies. Whereas humans," Dr. Vasquez interjected, "have spent our entire history fighting each other. We've had to constantly innovate, adapt, and improvise just to survive. When we encountered hegemony forces, we didn't see superior opponents, we saw a new puzzle to solve." Former Tech Specialist Court nodded enthusiastically. "The human approach to problem solving is completely different from ours, sir. When we encountered a technical challenge, we would consult the manuals, follow established procedures, and escalate to higher authorities if necessary. Humans just experiment. They take things apart to see how they work, then rebuild them better than before." The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Admiral Patricia Hayes, the Supreme Commander of Human Military Forces. I had seen her image in intelligence briefings, a stern-faced woman with steel-grey hair and eyes like ice. In person, she was even more intimidating. "Commander Sullivan," she said without preamble. "I trust our guest is comfortable." "As comfortable as a war criminal can be," Admiral Sullivan replied. "He's been quite cooperative so far." Admiral Hayes turned her attention to me, and I felt like an insect under a microscope. "Captain Vorth-Prime, your reputation precedes you. The architect of humanity's liberation, whether you intended to be or not." "I had no intention of liberating anyone," I said, finally finding my voice. "I simply made a practical decision based on available information." "And that's exactly the problem," Hayes replied. "You made assumptions about a species you didn't understand, based on limited data and cultural prejudices. It's a mistake we won't be repeating." The screen shifted to show a strategic map of the galaxy, with human-controlled territory marked in blue and remaining hegemony holdings in red. The blue zones had spread like an infection, consuming system after system with terrifying efficiency. "Your former empire is dissolving faster than we anticipated," Hayes continued. "Most systems are surrendering without a fight once they realize resistance is futile. The ones that do fight rarely last more than a few hours." I stared at the map in horror. The hegemony had controlled 3/4 of the galaxy just 2 years ago. Now, human forces occupied nearly the same territory, with the remaining hegemony holdings clustered in the galactic core. "How?" I whispered. "How did you move so quickly?" Admiral Hayes smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We learned from your mistakes, Captain. Instead of trying to rule through fear and superiority, we offered something your subjects had never experienced: choice. Join us willingly and keep your autonomy. Resist and face the consequences." "Most worlds chose to join," Dr. Vasquez added, "especially after they saw our technological advantages and realized we weren't interested in enslaving them. The hegemony's oppressive caste system made our offer of equality very attractive." The implications hit me like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just defeated the hegemony militarily, they had ideologically outmaneuvered us. By offering freedom instead of domination, they had turned our own subjects against us. It was brilliant, devastating, and utterly human. "What happens now?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Now we finish what you started," Admiral Hayes replied. "The remaining hegemony forces are retreating to the core worlds, probably planning some kind of last stand. We'll give them the opportunity to surrender, but if they choose to fight..." She shrugged. "Well, they'll discover that human patience has limits." The transmission ended, leaving me alone with my captors and my thoughts. I had expected execution, torture, or at least imprisonment under harsh conditions. Instead, the humans seemed genuinely interested in understanding how the hegemony had functioned, what mistakes had led to its downfall, and how to avoid repeating them in the future. "You're going to replace us, aren't you?" I said finally. "Become the new galactic power." Commander Sullivan exchanged glances with Dr. Vasquez before answering. "That's not really our goal, Captain. We never wanted to rule the galaxy, we just wanted to be left alone. But once your people started this war, we had to finish it. The question now is what comes after." "The hegemony maintained order through fear and oppression," Dr. Vasquez added. "We're hoping to do better. Create a federation of willing partners instead of a collection of conquered subjects. It's a radical concept, but we think it might work." The naive optimism was almost charming, but I knew better than to believe it would last. Power corrupted, and absolute power corrupted absolutely. The humans might start with noble intentions, but eventually they would become just another empire imposing their will on weaker species. Or perhaps not. Perhaps their strange human psychology, their talent for adaptation and innovation, would allow them to succeed where the hegemony had ultimately failed. Perhaps they really could create something better. 6 months later, I stood on the observation deck of a human research station, watching the last hegemony stronghold surrender without firing a shot. The war was over, ending not with a climactic battle but with a simple acknowledgement that resistance was pointless. I had become something I never expected: a consultant, helping human administrators understand hegemony, bureaucracy, and culture. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was important. The humans were serious about their goal of creating a more equitable galactic society, and they needed to understand their former enemies to avoid repeating the same mistakes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had accidentally created humanity's path to the stars, and now I was helping them reshape the galaxy in their image. It was the ultimate reversal of fortune, and perhaps the most human thing of all, turning disaster into opportunity, failure into success. My name is Vorth-Prime, and I was the fool who gave humans the stars. History will remember me as either the greatest idiot in galactic history or the accidental architect of a new golden age. Time will tell which assessment is correct. But one thing is certain: never underestimate a species with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Because sometimes the greatest threat comes not from those who seem powerful, but from those who refuse to accept their limitations. The humans taught us that lesson, and they learned it from studying the wreckage of my ship. In the end, perhaps that's the most fitting legacy of all.